from the University of, Elliot University in Scotland.
Thank you. I don't have a presentation, I just have a few stories that I'd like to share with you. I've got a few of my favorite quotes of Bob, sort of wrapped up in a few stories. And Bob, I'm sorry if I paraphrase and get any of your quotes wrong, so please interrupt and let me know. Yeah. At least the essence of the conversations, I think, is correct. Okay, so I'm going to start at the beginning for me, and that was a conversation that I had with Bob in the atrium of the Institute of Optics in Rochester. And that was at the start of Bob's Canadian adventure, and I was a postdoc in Glasgow. And Bob was trying to recruit me to run the quantum side of things in Ottawa. And I was very, very unsure about leaving Glasgow. I was very unsure about a new life in a new country. And it was a very scary time for me, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. So Bob knew this, and he reassured me. He said that if I came to Ottawa, I'd be part of his team. He said I shouldn't worry. He said that we would celebrate the wins together, but if anything went wrong, he would be there. In that conversation, he persuaded me that he would look out for his team members in any and all circumstances. He reassured me that I would not be going alone, we would be part of a team, and that he wanted me to be one of the first members of that team. So I said yes, and 6 months later started a postdoc position with Bob in Ottawa. So what was it like working with Bob? We all have our individual experiences here. Well, for long periods of time, I didn't really see him, which was quite a shock for me at first. Bob was traveling for most of the summer months when I was in Ottawa, and I was left to supervise the students myself. And at that stage in Ottawa, there were no PhD students, it was just undergrad students. But I never felt alone. I never felt that Bob didn't care. I just felt that Bob had the confidence in me to get the work that we had discussed together done. And that's what happened. And I think it's an incredible skill of Bob's to inspire so many people when he himself is so busy. And even though Bob is so busy, I remember he once said to me, and this was in the physics building here, he said, if a student emails you to say that they want to work with you, you drop whatever you're doing and make time for them. And that's something that's really stuck with me ever since. And this wasn't a postdoc, this wasn't a PhD student, this was an undergrad. And I think we all recognize Bob's enthusiasm for science, but also enthusiasm for people, and that comes through there. Okay, so having worked with Bob directly for 2 years, I know firsthand he stuck to his word in the atrium. In sports terms, Bob is a captain that backs his players, a captain that grows his players, a captain that gives his players freedom to make mistakes, and most importantly, Bob is a captain that will take the blame and protect his players when things go wrong. This is something I saw firsthand as a member of his group, and something I see now as a colleague. I hope that I install a fraction of this confidence in my own group members. Okay, so if you saw your supervisor once a month over the summer, when you met up with him, you would expect in-depth, detailed conversations about experiments and physics, right? Well, not all the time. Not all the conversations were in-depth physics chats. Working with Bob, I sometimes thought his mind is like a multi-sided die with different topics of conversation written on all sides. At times this is frustrating, but it's always exciting. Every 2 minutes, the die would be rolled, and then you'd spend the next 2 minutes talking about the particular topic on that die. Okay, so the topics of conversation that I wrote down, but are not limited to, are physics, a great new idea, a terrible new idea, the relative merits of experimentalists versus theorists, the relative merits of physicists versus engineers, the origin of names, grammar, gossip, jokes, sleep, dressing up, parties, and obviously coffee. To quote Bob, we like science, but we love sleep. Why would anyone want to have a meeting before 9:30 in the morning? And shall we get coffee? Oh, I love coffee. So that brings me to another of my favorite Bob quotes, and for me in particular, this is very important. I remember that Bob once said, "How can I understand the science if I can't understand the sentence?" Well, it's one of my favorites. So when I came to work for you, Bob, not only did I not enjoy writing, but I didn't really know how to. But you taught me about run-on sentences, comma splices, and my writing no longer has any dangling participles. Most importantly, you showed me that writing can be fun. I don't quite have the ability to change the meaning of a sentence with the tiniest tweak like you, but I'm certainly working on it. This is one of the most valuable lessons that you've taught me, and I thank you for enlightening me and showing me the way. So I asked Megan, a former undergrad in Bob's group, if she had any good Bob quotes, and she reminded me of these two classics. So picture us in the site building. There's the undergrads. Elliot was a master's student, and he had started. And Bob opened the door, and without saying hello or anything, he said, "Elliot, you've cut your hair since I last saw you. It's like a sawtooth waveform, haircuts." And then one time in a group meeting, Megan was sitting beside, so I know you have enormous group meetings. At the time, the group meetings were maybe 10, 15 people. So we were in a group meeting, and Megan was sitting beside Bob when two other undergrads, Jeff and Alan, walked in and sat down at the table. And at some point after the meeting started, Bob drew a large arrow and wrote some text on an A4 piece of paper. And he passed the paper over to Megan and pointed the arrow at Jeff. And the writing said in big letters, "Is that Alan?" So Mayhel sends his regards and wants me to recall another classic Bob story. So this was from Bob and Diane's Diwali party in their condo just down the road, and we'll be there tonight. And this was a fantastic celebration of Indian culture, and Bob was there wearing his full sari. What's the name? Kurta. So after dinner entertainment and a few drinks, Bob wanted to further celebrate Indian culture. Diane knows what's coming. And he told the story of the Mahabharata. Now, the Mahabharata is a very famous Indian story, and Bob told the story at length. No one quite knew where he was going, and of all of the things that Bob could have taken from the story, Bob took delight in telling us about a character who was born blind as his mother closed her eyes during sex when he was conceived. It was not clear why Bob told this story until the end, when he concluded that the moral of the story is never have sex with your eyes closed. So I like this story all the more as I just picture Diane saying, "Robert, stop it, you're embarrassing me." Which is perhaps my absolute favorite quote of all time. I don't think I've ever seen any of Diane's attempts to hold Bob back work. Okay, so finally, I'd like to share with you one of my favorite quotes from Bob. I remember myself, Bob, and the undergrads in Sight again having a discussion about why we all liked physics. And I said something like, I like physics because I can learn one mathematical concept and apply it to different fields. And the student said something like they could learn how to pass their exams. And then it was Bob's turn, and Bob, to my surprise, said, people think that I like physics because I love the science, but that's not the case. I like physics because I love working with people. Every day I wake up and I get to work with different people, and that's what makes it interesting. So Bob, I know that you will feel privileged to have worked and work with all of us, but that's not the case. It's us that are privileged to work with you.